All right, good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us here for episode 18 of Cage Side Convos. Coming to you live, as always, from American Top Team here in Watertown. I am Rick Huntsman.
And I am Quince
So,
from Hold Down Upstate. And today, actually, we're going to be talking about protecting your energy and recognizing patterns of energy competition in our day-to-day lives and kind of being aware of our own input and those of others around us, just on the day-to-day.
okay.
And just kind of realizing the patterns and also learning to kind of break them at the same time. I think, just for starters, as an example, imagine you wake up in the morning and you feel good. You got all your shit together. You get up, you handle your routine, you get to work, and you got that one person that looks at you and says, yo, that outfit sucks. That outfit sucks. Is that, what shoes are those?
That's usually the conversation I have with myself when I walk out of the house. What are you wearing?
What are those? But how does that make you feel? It kind of zaps you of all that energy that you had built up coming in, and it was not even up to you. That's someone else, giving someone else the power. But it works in the opposite sense as well too. You could wake up and have a shitty day, and come into work and have someone say, "Hey, great job yesterday on this and that,"
Sure.
and that kind of gives you that little boost.
Sure.
So, when we talk about energy transference or competition amongst people, we're talking about on our day-to-day interactions, and how and how that kind of leaves us feeling, and how we might leave others feeling.
So something interesting. So we've talked about this notion a couple of times, and we chatted a little bit about this morning, but it just kind of hit me in a very specific way about energy competition.
Mm-hmm.
It almost instills that notion that there's a finite amount of energy. So you see this a lot of times when someone's successful, when someone wants to hate on someone for being successful, like
Mm-hmm.
there's this notion that it's finite. Like just because someone else has good energy or someone else has success,
Mm-hmm.
that there's not enough left for the rest of us.
Right.
Which I think kind of, actually I think might be a good setup for those categories
Sure.
that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, well, because I do think when it comes to competition, there is a feeling of deficit, either a surplus or deficit.
Sure.
So, I think those without balance tend to pull it from others in different kind of ways. And I think what we did was kind of break down into 4 different groups some of those ways in which that energy competition or transfers exists. And real quick, way number 1 is by way of aggression. So we'll call these people the aggressors. And we'll come back to this as we go. Number 2 would be the victim, playing the victim role. Number 3 would be detective, or someone who kind of just pries at you until they get what they want. And number 4 would be the aloof person. A definition of aloof is someone who's just kind of ambiguous in their stance, seemingly kind of uninterested, and someone that kind of just puts them off at a distance. But we'll go with the aggressor because I think that's one of the most common personality types when it comes to this energy transference. And when I say aggressor, this is kind of like the bully. So this could be physical aggression, it could be verbal aggression, in which they try and take that energy from an individual.
Right.
I think for whatever reason, certainly when it comes to physical things of physical matters, it's pretty plain and simple what that looks like to see energy move from one person to the next.
Sure.
But
I think something interesting that you said when you we started listing out kind of the categories, is people that take energy are those without balance, right? So that means that inherently they're looking to fulfill some kind of need that they can't fill themselves, so they look to take that from other people. So like the aggressor, I guess kind of in your mind, so when someone uses physical violence to obtain energy from somebody else, what kind of need do you think that's filling? What kind of deficit do you think is in their life maybe that would create that?
What kind of deficit? Man, you know, so when I see someone in that position or playing that role, the first thing I think is, oh, someone did that to them. You know, someone did that to someone who was not aware of these patterns, use physical violence against this person to get what they want or to feel a certain way, or use verbal aggression. So I always think these are learned patterns. As far as like the individual things and how they, you know, what their self-esteem must be like, or what they've seen in their life or what's happened to them, that's kind of goes person to person. Right. But I think oftentimes the aggressor and maybe just like the rest of them, it's something, they're learned patterns. Sure. Which is tough because you almost want to feel sympathy, for the individual.
Right.
But you in protecting your energy, your own energy, you maybe can't give sympathy to someone who's an aggressor.
Right.
Because that's not how they receive energy. That sympathy is not going to necessarily help make them feel whole.
Sure.
And they've got to take it by, the means of, verbal or physical.
Right. So I think that, so basically it creates kind of like a tit for tat mentality, right? So they have their energy drained in this way, so they have to recover it in that exact same way.
Yes.
And a lot of times in that situation, I think people don't maybe understand that that's exactly what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Because energy, it's definitely something you feel.
Sure.
Something you just kind of inherently understand, So I think this, when you pitch the topic to me, protecting your energy, I didn't know maybe exactly what you meant, because logically I don't think I've ever broken it down like this, but it's something that I kind of felt like I understood, because I think that's how energy speaks to us,
Sure.
And so I think once you sit down and once you kind of, like you said, if you recognize that this is a pattern of behavior, and then you start to look at it logically and understand, okay, why am I trying to take this energy in this form,
right?
And how it's negative, and it becomes unilateral. Mm-hmm. So kind of that kind of like vampiric notion.
Sure.
It's always I'm taking and I'm never giving back.
Right.
And once you understand that, you classify that as a negative habit. I understand why, you're trying to take the energy in this form. You can start to break it down and understand that you can receive positive energy in different modes and healthier modes, and then also be able to reciprocate it, which I think is pretty standard throughout each one of the kind of the basic categories of energy vampires, I guess. I really wish I had a better word for that.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of it boils down to, like you said, understanding if this is a pattern behavior,
Sure.
why you're taking energy in this way. But a lot of times people don't understand that it's negative.
Yeah.
They just inherently know that they need energy, and they know, okay, if I do this, then I'll get it.
Sure.
If I push somebody around, if I make somebody else feel shitty, they have to lose some of their energy, and
Right.
it goes into the ether, and then it's there for me to take.
Yeah. 100%. And I think that is one of the main issues, is that it's been so commonplace in how we have interacted with each other and amongst each other just for generations. I'd hate to think about how far this goes back, but I think we're just at a point in time now in which we have the maybe the comfort to sit and think about these things and reflect on these certain patterns, and take a step back and recognize them for what they are. So I think a lot of times, as we go through some of these bullet points, people do it unconsciously. I think these patterns sit so deep in our subconscious being that we don't even know we're being a part.
Yeah.
So that was the aggressor.
Sure.
I think we hit most points on that.
Yeah.
The next bullet point I want to hit is that of the role of the victim. Now, the victim, was that person that kind of what was me person, or anytime you bump into them, they talk about how bad their life is, or what negative happened to them, or the issues they're having in their relationship. But you find yourself, kind of having to pay, your attention is there, and you have to give. Oh no, it'll be okay, or oh maybe you should try and do this. But you're giving your energy to the situation and this individual, and they're taking it all in, and they're learning at the same time. It kind of what's it called? Positive, not reaffirmation, but reinforcement.
Yeah, sure.
Of this victim mentality.
Right.
So all your well wishings and solutions that you might offer these people, when that's not really what they're looking for, because they get energy by saying, "Oh, this shit sucks.
Right.
My life sucks."
Right. So the people that aren't necessarily looking for improvement, but they're basically they're digging an energy hole.
Yes.
Right. And they're
Yes.
showing you this is they're begging for energy. They're sitting there and saying, this sucks, and they're relying on your sympathy to fill their energy
Fill
up.
that void.
And they have no intention of ever reciprocating or giving it back, or building themselves up to a place where they can make it better.
Yeah.
It's just a black hole.
Yeah. They don't even feel like it can be better. They feel like that feeling they get when people show them attention, shower them with attention, is what makes them feel whole.
Right.
But this is just a constant filling of a void that's essentially going to be never ending.
Yeah.
Because you can't really give any energy out yourself from that.
Right. What's interesting, right? So when this kind of self-victimization, when there are people that have been through tragedy, a traumatic experience, something significant and life-altering, when they actually have been a victim of something violent or aggressive or horrible, a lot of times there's a tendency for them to shut off from energy transference and just deal with being in an energy deficit, because they're afraid of becoming this kind of person, this kind of victimized, like self-victimized energy sucker.
Sure.
Which the problem is those are the people that genuinely want to get better, and people that we genuinely want to give energy to, and that want to help, because those are the people that are going to take this positive energy and build themselves back up, and they're looking for a way to reciprocate that, right? So these are people a lot of times that have a tendency to operate in an energy deficit, and to the point of like self-sabotage, right? They can never get better because they just want to give and they don't want to take, because they don't want to be the victim, even though they have a genuine need for energy.
Right.
The people that are negative, kind of these energy drainers, are the people that overinflate, especially like daily
Stuff
issues.
that we all go through.
Yeah, my tire was low on air. I needed, like there was fucking frost on my window, so I'm late. You know what I mean? All these things that aren't, like, nobody really gives a shit about, nobody wants to give energy to, but because they built this habit of understanding that, okay, if I overinflate, if I victimize myself, people will give me energy. And that's when it becomes incredibly unilateral, one way, and very, very negative, for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, and that's a good point. Those people who might recognize these patterns and they don't want to fall into that, so they give more than they have.
Right.
And unfortunately, that can't last forever.
Right.
And sometimes the repercussions of that are serious.
Yeah.
And depression and worse.
Right.
And it's hard to get out of that.
Sure.
It's definitely hard to get out of that, especially because you could be that person with a big smile on your face all the time, always offering to help people, always there for people, and someone might not ever know you know, really that deficiency that you have, because everyone thinks you're good, you're solid.
Yeah, until it's a Facebook post about the tragedy.
Till it's too
suicide,
late.
You know?
Till it's too late. It's fucking brutal.
It is. It really is. And you know, I think to just jump on this tangent while it's right here, I think it's really important for us to take our own advice, to understand that in order to give energy, sometimes we have to receive energy.
Sure.
The topic you touched on a couple of weeks ago, and I forget exactly how it cropped up in conversation, but it might have been when we were like really focusing on gratitude one week. I think even before the convo we had on gratitude specifically, but how you can develop kind of a self-replicating energy, how you can become self-sufficient on your energy, you know, through, you know, practice habits of gratitude,
appreciation,
vulnerability, appreciation, diligence, discipline, all these things, all these habits we can work on and we can build. To a certain extent, we can replenish our own energy, and it can feel like we can give forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. But eventually, when something truly negative happens and the universe takes some of our energy away, and we fall out of habits or whatever we do, we're missing steps and we're not able to replace our own energy, that's when we have to reach out for help.
Sure.
We have to. There's no other way around it. You need energy from other people. And it's perfectly fine to take energy. It's perfectly fine to receive energy and be grateful for it, but not do it unilaterally. You know, and a lot of times when people help us, the people that help us are usually in a position that we're never going to be able to help them in the same way. When I talk about stuff like this, I always use my mom as an example, because I mean she's helped me out financially, emotionally, physically. She's given me a place to live. She's provided me with so much advice. She's done tremendous things for me, and she's in a position because, you know, she's made good decisions and she's got a good head on her shoulders and stuff that I'm never going to be able to help her in the exact same way that she helped me. And I hope I never have to. You know, if I ever have to give my mom a place to live, it's going to make me really sad because something crazy happened. You know, something very traumatic happened. But, you know, so for me, that's a unilateral energy transfer. You know, she's giving it to me. But if I was just sitting here victimizing myself, like I can't afford my bills, I don't have a license, I don't have a car, I don't have this, I don't have that, you know, and just sucking all this energy with no intention of giving it back, then it becomes a problem. For me, the way I understand, because I needed that help and I had to take it, and I felt shitty because I felt like it was one way. Universal standards, I can balance it by when I have the opportunity, I can transfer that energy other places. You know? So understanding that it can't always be 50-50 between you and the person that gives you that energy. Some people it is. You know, some people we give back and forth all the time, and that's a very fulfilling, very satisfying relationship. But when we feel that we're in need, right, we have to accept it, but prevent ourselves from being the victim. Prevent ourselves from always just taking, you know?
Yeah, no, and that's a very important point to make, because essentially it is the balance that we seek. You know, whether it's individual, whether it's our group of friends, whether it's the community organization we're a part of, it's the need for balance to be able to kind of progress further. So by no means are we demonizing, you know, that transference of energy in times of need. I think that's why human connection is one of the most important things that we experience, because this happens naturally. But that's why we think it's equally important to bring up how it's taken advantage of, and recognizing those patterns, most importantly in ourselves first, and then in others as well, so we don't fall victim to that unbalanced, you know what I mean?
Fall victim to being a victim.
Fall victim to being a victim, sure. Yes.
Yeah, I think the huge distinction between legitimately needing help and self-victimizing, self-sabotaging. And so kind of one thing that if I were to identify a person as like self-victimizing, it's the first thing out of their mouth is always negative in any conversation, which is kind of how you started out with. Right? If the first thing everybody's gonna have bad days. Sometimes I catch myself doing it. Sometimes I list off, today's just not going great. Like this and this and this happened, you know, and then I catch myself doing it. We can't let it become a pattern. If the first thing out of your mouth is always negative, probably you're self-victimizing.
You're that person,
You're the woe is me
or
person.
you're being that person.
Right.
And one of the great things of talking about this sort of stuff and recognizing it is the ability to adapt and to change.
Right.
So when we talk about the aggressor, or the victim, or the detective, or the aloof person, and you might find yourself maybe in one or more of those categories, that we're not saying you are that person. We're saying that you have patterns of this characteristic.
Right.
And so it's at that point that you have that choice and free will to change.
Right.
And I think that's why we get into stuff like this.
Right.
We're certainly not here to point the fingers. Trying to understand this for myself, I find myself in an array of these categories,
Sure.
and sometimes they change from day to day.
Sure.
But all times I'm trying to recognize the patterns so I could pull myself out from it.
Right.
Just out of self-respect and self-progression, and also like respect for the people who care for me and who are there and willing to give this energy when I need it. So, it's just appreciation for things like that.
Sure.
In which we bring this stuff up.
I think that the next one really piqued my interest, and I really wanted to hear you dive more deeply into it.
Sure.
For me too, I kind of want to understand exactly how you feel like that the detective kind of category, what exactly that means to you, and kind of how that's a negative and unilateral energy draw.
Sure. So the detective is someone who, like we said before, kind of pries, uses questions, to try and get the information they seek, or to try and, reach that vulnerable spot. Maybe it's of control or manipulation and things like that.
Sure.
I know I've been in, honestly, thinking back, I find often relationships, intimate relationships are times in which some of these patterns occur most often. And, I think for people to I don't know if it's about getting the upper hand, because I'm trying to understand it too.
Right.
If it's about getting the upper hand, or always being right there, right in your face,
Right.
needing to know what's going on, what are your thoughts,
Right.
what's your next move,
Right.
and don't get me wrong, in a balanced way,
Control.
establishing
Right.
control through this, and like I said, in a balanced way, this could be this back and forth, can be a balanced conversation.
Right.
But if you're not in a position to give this sort of information or time or energy, I think the person has to respect that.
Yeah.
Or else it crosses the point at which it's no longer a conversation, and it's more of a demand.
Demand. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's the exact word that popped in my head when you were talking about that. Yeah, that makes more sense. Because when you just kind of, we were chatting before, and you threw that kind of category to me, the way I played it out in my mind was, detective, somebody who's prying, somebody who's asking a lot of questions.
Mm-hmm.
And at a cursory glance, it doesn't seem like that's inherently negative.
Right.
Until you extrapolate it to that end of control, of what are you doing? What are you thinking? If you think something without me knowing, you're
Right.
hiding things from me.
Exactly.
And you see
Exactly.
that a lot. Which that is almost, it's almost a form of aggression when it hits that point. You know what I mean?
100%
but
right.
it's a hidden aggression.
Mhm.
It's a subtle aggression. It's a sneaky aggression.
Mhm.
But yeah, detective, right? So yeah, somebody who sneaks around behind the scenes and figures out exactly what's going on.
Mhm.
And one thing too, I found myself actually teetering on the edge of that, if not fully being in that realm, is when you ask somebody something and they respond like, I don't know, I've got to think about it, I've got to figure it out.
Right.
Well, if you've got to figure it out, my response, my just and right response is, okay, I understand you need that space.
Right.
the detective, right? So someone with that energy deficiency, and maybe it's a self-confidence thing. I'm deficient in self-confidence, which again is something that resonates with me, especially, man, through my 20s, and what am I now, 33? So into my early 30s now.
Right.
It's every time, man. Someday I'll charge my phone before we start doing this. But yeah, so you pry and you pry and you pry, and at a certain point, if someone needs space, if someone is doing like self-evaluation, and I mean, how often do you and I talk about the importance of meditation and personal thought and time alone, and the detective vampire, when they pry past that point and they don't give you the space to internalize things or make sense of things, it's very, very negative, because then that forces you to give your energy that you would rather keep to processing and figuring things out and self-betterment. You have to give that energy to them, and so you start putting yourself into a deficit because they're being demanding.
Or worse, you're dishonest, or you lie just to placate to the situation. And to give the answer that this person might want, because I think oftentimes they pry and they need to know, because they feel like everything what you have to say is always going to be a reflection of them, of who they are, or what they need to be doing, or so it's not so much about what you had to say, but how it's going to make them feel, how they think. It reflects them.
Maybe, definitely. Maybe people that have trouble understanding, your opinions are your reflection of yourself and not a reflection of them. You know what I mean? People, okay.
And I think, you had a good point in saying that maybe it was a lack of confidence, self-confidence. Because certainly if you were confident, in your ways, or in yourself in that situation, it would be nothing. Whatever answer that was received really wouldn't sway you, to the core. I mean, it might make you might need to make those changes, given what you want in that future. But it shouldn't necessarily sway the core of who you are.
Yeah, that's huge, man. And even like this got a lot deeper for me than than maybe I even wanted it to. But it's playing back through past relationships and stuff, when I've found myself occupying the role of detective and largely assigning my self-worth to the other person's opinion or what the other person's thinking. And if they have, say worst case scenario, they have doubts in the relationship, and that's a reflection of me instead of, and and you cling to that. And if you keep prying, you keep pushing, you keep diving into it, ultimately it catastrophizes things, right? It just makes things worse. Instead of understanding that whatever answer you get it has to be enough. And so definitely a pattern I've recognized myself, and I've never attached it to that exact word, but it makes a tremendous amount of sense the way you explain it, and recognizing the pattern, and actually sometimes categorizing things like that makes it easier to identify. And now I can tell myself, all right, don't be the detective, just breathe, understand that what that person's going through is them, and it's not about you.
We can't put our need to know above someone else's. Our self-worth above someone else's.
So our need to know is what's creating the energy imbalance for us, right? And we're trying to satisfy it, for sure, forcing that out.
And I'm glad you were kind of hung up on it, because this was, me too, going through all these. I was hung up on this too, because at first glance, I'm like, well, you have someone asking you questions, someone wants to know, doesn't that mean they care? Doesn't that mean they care?
To a certain extent.
To a certain extent, sure. But if their need to know surpasses your need to know as well, you know what I mean? For your own personal reasons, that it creates that imbalance. And moving forward from it, are we good for it? And
until 2 o'clock in the morning when I'm saying
sure, that'll happen. But also, I think it creates this fourth bullet point, which is that of the aloof person, or
I don't know what you mean, Quince.
No, you couldn't. or someone who is ambiguous in their stance, or not forthcoming, who kind of just won't come out and tell you what it is, they feel. But now it seems like a direct contradiction of the detective and what we were just talking about. But there are also instances where you can, you get your attention by someone always prying. You're used to that attention that you get by someone always prying. And you'll notice that going through these, and we're going to come back to it, but they all seem to kind of correlate and build off of each other, these negative energy transference patterns. But that of the aloof person is someone who, in times where you need them to be present, might physically be there, but still are yet distant.
How about this scenario? Say, hey, what's wrong? Oh, nothing. Yeah. Sure. That's it's super cliche, but I think that's kind of the easiest jumping off point for that, that aloof kind of negative energy transfer. Yeah, it makes sense.
And because no one wants to be a detective. You know what I mean? And but if you have ever been either this person or around someone like this, you find that it almost creates that in you, just to understand who they are, what they need or what's wrong,
and even so as we go, I kind of trying to put yourself in each one of these situations, and I've done it before. I've been aloof before and wanted people to dig, and I've also done the digging before, and immediately dealing with someone who's aloof or ambiguous or withholding, it's exhausting. It's exhausting.
I think thinking back to when I was younger and even just in relationships, once again, I think I was that person. More than anything else. Whether it was that I didn't want to, come to terms with the truth of the matter of things or of situations with individuals, whether, you might not want to hurt somebody or even hurt yourself. So you kind of just go around the issue and you go around and you just try and dance forever.
Not willing to be vulnerable, maybe, or scared to be vulnerable. Absolutely, man.
In which none of these patterns are gonna last forever. You could dance around the truth for a little bit, but essentially they come to a crashing halt. And these are the things that we're trying to avoid by reflecting on some of it.
Sure. Yeah, and I think it's interesting. Before we get into how they tie together, as we kind of went through, I kind of subscribe like a little bit of a definition or how the energy transfer takes place for each one. And I just want to bounce these off you and kind of see if it satisfies like where your mind was when you created these.
Sure.
So basically, the aggressor is going to be someone who takes energy. The victim is going to be someone who receives energy, who just sucks energy out of people, and presumably people give it to them willingly, right? So others have to constantly give, right? The detective is someone who forces you to give them the energy. Right?
So would you say that's still taking?
Yeah, it's still taking, but it's forcing them to give it to you, right? Whereas the aggressor is just physically taking.
Sure.
Right. So I guess
forces to give.
Right.
Okay.
If you have something like you have a candy bar, and I walk up to you, I'm the aggressor. I just snatch it from your hand.
Sure.
Right? That's the aggressor. That's just taking energy. Right. The victim would be someone who's like, oh, geez, I'm really hungry, and you're like, oh, okay, fine. I don't want to, but I'm going to give this to you.
Right.
The detective would be someone who's like, forces you through questioning. Like, do you really need to eat that? Are you sure you want to eat that? Wouldn't it be better off if I had that?
Right.
Kind of forcing them to give that over. And then the aloof person is coercing people into giving them things, convincing them to give them through like, are you hungry? Like, well, nah, if it's your last candy bar, I'm not gonna, I don't need it. And, if that's all you got, and finally you're like, are you sure I can give it to you? Like, no, it's okay. I mean, it is my favorite, but, I don't need it. And then finally you're just like, fucking fine, take it, right? So each one of these things, I think, I don't know, that's how I've kind of conceptualized it in my mind.
No, I think that was a good breakdown. I as I was jotting it down, the aggressor, of course, taking, victim, receiving. The detective is passively taking. Passively taking,
okay,
the aloof person is passively receiving.
Right.
Which I think are good differentiations and necessary.
Right.
Because they are very similar. I probably would have, just as easy as take and received, I probably would have grouped them like that before.
Yeah.
But
active and passive.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
sure. Yeah. I like that a lot. And I think that perfectly ties into kind of what you were getting to before I jumped off onto that is how they kind of tie together.
Sure.
Whereas like the aggressor is always taking,
Mm-hmm.
and the victim is used to having that energy taken away.
Right.
So they need.
And they have that deficit of energy when it comes, it comes to that sense.
And they understand that if they say, well, this person took all my energy.
Right.
This person took all my energy.
Mm-hmm.
This life always takes all my energy, and then you give them
sympathy.
I need
attention.
your energy.
Sure.
I need your energy because this person's always taking mine.
Right.
And yeah, I think those two. So kind of we classify those as like active energy. Actively taking other people's energy.
Yes.
Or actively receiving the
Yep.
energy. Yeah, sure.
Yep. And same things with the detective or the person who pries, who passively takes this sort of energy, and the aloof person who doesn't want to give, and so they're passively receiving,
Right.
that attention.
Right.
And certainly, if you're prying into my everyday life, anytime I see you, naturally, what am I gonna do? It's going to kind of shift me.
Right.
If I stay in this sort of relationship or back and forth,
Yeah.
that's going to shift how I interact with that.
Right. So the power dynamic
Yeah.
shifts.
All of it.
So
yeah.
how many times? Again, romantic relationships are the easiest ones because those are the people we tend to have the most difficult conversations with.
Mm-hmm.
But even in with friends and stuff, coworkers, what have you, how many times have you found yourself in one conversation play both roles? Play the detective and then play aloof. Play the aggressor and then play the victim.
Mm-hmm.
How many times have you felt that switch?
Right.
Because it's almost a power dynamic.
Yes.
You know what I mean? We figured out, okay, I've gotten all the energy out of this person I can this way. They're starting to try to get they're being aggressive. They're trying to get my energy. So I have to flip it. I have to be the victim now. So they'll keep giving me energy.
Mm-hmm.
And when a conversation becomes unilateral like that, it becomes very damaging for both people.
Sure.
Very damaging for both people. Definitely more damaging, I think, for the person who's just having their energy drained. Which again, if it's a hard conversation, a lot of it goes both ways. And like you said, it's not that it makes us inherently bad people, but we're not being the best that we could be, and it's more beneficial to recognize this energy transference or this unilateral energy drain.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. I think we do hop from one to the next.
Sure,
in seeking this energy. What I find more often is that we, at first glance, seem attracted to the person who's on the other side of that energy transfer. Being aloof coming up, I'd find myself with a whole bunch of detectives, always prying into my, information. Where were you? What are you doing? Who are you texting? Things like this.
And it starts off seemingly innocent, but eventually the power dynamics that you start to realize it
starts set in, and some people, and I think one of the most obvious are the abuser and or the aggressive and the victim, and you see this dynamic play off so many times. If they might run to Facebook and talk about all the problems, and I'm the victim of this, and so always does this to me, and And then everybody hops on their side and says,
Yeah.
"Oh,
Yeah.
leave that motherfucker, do what you,
Yeah.
you know."
Yeah.
And then what happens? A week later,
Yeah.
you see the photos again.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, don't stay out of our business.
Yeah.
This is ours to handle. Isn't it? You know, and it's
Then all of a sudden they're aloof. They go
Right,
from
can't
victim
get
to
it,
being
right.
aloof. You know.
and you know, we laugh about it now, but you know, it happens so often, and it sucks. You know, it's sad, and it's
Yeah.
almost you could predict this shit.
Yeah.
You could predict it.
Yeah.
God forbid, man. I never want to be in that position where people
Yeah.
can predict such
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. That's yeah. So again, I mean, you know, through the years and coming up, and especially understanding my, I've had a lot of issues with my temper, being very just kind of, I don't want to say naturally aggressive person, but I mean, I didn't understand that I was very aggressive, and it took me a while to start understanding that. And then as I go back and I replay patterns that I've seen in relationships and stuff, and a very deep-seated desire not to fall into any of these roles, I've started becoming very attentive to it, and I recognize I'm getting better at recognizing it in the moment, recognizing it sooner, but sometimes there's still times when I have to look back and say, fuck, I did this again.
Yeah.
But man, it's difficult, and it's especially when you look back, people say toxic all the time.
Sure.
And B, just that one-way energy transfer is incredibly toxic, man. It's so bad.
Yeah. Because not only do you, so the hardest thing, it's easy to spot in other people. Just glancing over the topics, easy to spot in other people.
Yeah.
What's hard to do is recognize it in yourself, and then also change that. Because
Well,
once you go ahead.
It's hard to be honest with ourselves because all of these have a very negative connotation.
Sure.
None of these sound like great things to be.
Right.
And we never want to admit that. So it's hard to have that honest conversation with ourselves. But if you don't admit it, if you don't recognize it, you can never fix it.
Sure. And not only do you do your patterns, extend, but but the patterns of others in which you interact with, it kind of extends theirs as well.
Sure. What's interesting too is I think the aggressor and the victim, they kind of couple up naturally. The detective and the aloof kind of couple up naturally. What's interesting to see as kind of playing with these roles and stuff is how they can all kind of interact with the other too. The way the detective can kind of come out of us when we're dealing with someone who's a victim. Right. Usually it's an anger response or a fed up response. So we constantly dealing with someone who's a victim and say, whatever, we're the benevolent energy giver in this situation, just for argument's sake, and finally we're like, I'm sick of how you're acting. I'm sick of this one-way energy transference. So you start digging in a little bit. What's really going on? What's making you act this way? And you start digging. It starts out, again, kind of benevolent, wanting to help them get to the bottom of what's going on. And you realize more and more and more that you're just going to keep draining your energy. So we ramp it up, and then we shift the power dynamic in our favor because they've taken all of our energy, and we're going to take it back. So now we can use this detective role, this prying role into the victim. And it translates the same way with the aggressor, too. Someone who's just physically demanding, like, all right, man, what's going on? Why are you being like this? And then eventually pushing them to the point where they're uncomfortable and they really don't want to talk about it, and now you're taking their energy kind of to even the score. So what starts out sometimes is benevolent. If that person doesn't want to change, and we're trying to force them to change and they won't, then we're just saying, fuck it, we're taking our energy back. And that's where it can go from being kind and a genuine act of trying to help that person get better into us shifting the power dynamic.
Right.
Which is, again, why we end up playing multiple roles maybe even in one conversation. However we need to get that energy, we're going to at some point.
One of the most eye-opening experience having to do with this topic was witnessing a victim and how easily the switch into aggressor turned into. And it was wild because victims usually, they seem timid and kind of withdrawn. But once that power dynamic is flipped, it's still need to get the energy
Right.
in whatever way, you
Sure.
know, you got to make it happen.
Yeah.
And to see that switch was definitely eye-opening for me.
Yeah. And I think that really solidifies the identification as a victim. If you see somebody that can switch to the other side, very much all they're doing is trying to take energy. They're just
Yes.
trying to fill a void, and like you said, by whatever means necessary.
Right.
Because we all know all these tricks. I think every single one of these categories resonates with somebody. And if we're being honest with ourselves, we can put ourselves in each one of those positions.
Yeah.
And if we're being honest with ourselves, any heated argument we've ever had, you know, any hard discussion, especially again romantic relationships and stuff, it's very easy to identify all of these things. And you know, the fact that we can switch between these roles shows truly that we're just looking to take
Yes.
in some form or another.
Yes.
Either I'm going to actively take it,
Yes.
I'm going to actively get it from you, I'm going to passively take it, or I'm going to passively get you to give it to me. You know what I mean? And we can
Yeah.
switch if we're
Fluid.
looking to.
It's fluid, and it really just comes from that power dynamic.
That
and
imbalance, yeah.
Mhm.
Those without balance, like you said earlier, yeah, it's huge.
Mhm.
It's huge. So
Um,
how do we deal with that?
you know, first
Straight up
thing is,
aggressive, punch him in the face.
yeah. Would you say you like that front kick?
Yeah, that's
You-
right. Fucking
right
right
in
to
the
the chin.
mouth.
That'll end a conversation. Pretty sure.
But I think how we deal is, like we stated a couple times, first and foremost, we have to be aware. And this is just on a daily. You know, we have to be aware of our routine and our patterns first. You know, because like you said, it's not your job, you know, to necessarily change that of the aggressor, or who, you know, someone who maybe
Right.
just, you know, might kind of pry at you. It's not our job to change people. It's not our job to change the world. But it is our job and responsibility to hold ourselves accountable, you know, for our actions and our patterns and the patterns that we help kind of create out in the world. So I think for starters, it is the awareness first, self-awareness.
Sure.
Self-awareness and our role in the situation. And next, it's about removing ourselves from that role, you know, in one form or the other. You know, I think I said, you know, I was talking about, maybe we could talk about the power of saying no, or just letting people know, because what was it? We were talking about how this sort of dynamic, that'll happen from people that you know, least expected, you know, people that you think are friends, people you think are family. And sometimes you feel like, well, I love these people, so I owe it to them. I owe this patience to them, and to say something and say, hey, you do this and this is how it makes me feel.
Yeah.
But you have no control over how they're going to react.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's not just about, so that's not always going to save you, although I do think that can be the appropriate move, next step at times.
Yeah, and so it's interesting because we, you know, obviously we talk a lot about how we can control, you know, understanding what's in our control, kind of that stoic mindset of understanding what's in our control, accepting what's in our control, and acting accordingly to what is in our control, right?
Sure.
So us saying something, us identifying the problem, it's our responsibility to inform.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It is our responsibility to inform. If we're feeling a certain way, if we feel like they're acting negatively, if they are affecting who we are,
Yes.
then it's a problem, and that's when we have to say something.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned kind of the art of saying no, right? And we touched on this a little bit, but it's something I apply kind of all over, and I think I've talked about it before, is the improvisational mindset. So one of the baseline rules of doing improv is yes and, right? Because you and your partner are doing a scene. If they do something, you accept that they did it and you build off of it. Right? And I apply that to jiu-jitsu, I apply that to Muay Thai, I apply it to boxing, and I try to apply it to my relationships in life. Is I can't stop you from doing what you want, but I can accept that you did it and build off of it.
Right.
Right? So you tried to take my energy, okay, that's fine, and I can build and I can tell you how this affected me. Now, the way that differentiates from saying no, right, is when I say no, if you do something and I say no, it stops right there. It stops. If I tell you something and you say no to me, the conversation stops. You don't have any interest in bettering yourself, hearing my aspect of it. If I tell you no, I have no interest in hearing your end of the conversation or of trying to grow mutually, right? And so like in martial arts, if you're doing jiu-jitsu and somebody goes to do something, you say no and you start fighting them and trying to make it so they can't do what they're trying to do, you exhaust yourself, you get tired and you lose, you know? So this kind of, again, just to keep the metaphor going between, you know, multiple areas of life, but by saying yes and, okay, so yes, you want my energy and I'm not going to give it to you. Right. So it's not me saying no, it's me accepting that that's what you're trying to do, and I'm going to look for a way to circumvent that. I'm going to look for a way to go around this brick wall. I'm not just going to sit here and keep saying no and smashing my head into the wall. Because then we're both just sitting there saying no, and what are we progressing? You know, and you see that all the time in especially conversations about like religion and politics and stuff, the things that people get entrenched in. As soon as people start saying no, there's name calling, there's aggression, and that's when all these negative, these unilateral energy transferences take place. If I say no, that means you can't have my energy, and you get mad, and you keep working harder. You're going to find a way. You're going to go through those roles, and you're going to find a way to take it from me. But if I say yes, okay, I understand you're trying to do this. I understand what you're trying to accomplish. I'm going to steer the conversation in a different direction. You know, yes, you can keep doing this for as much as you want, but it's not going to be successful because I'm going to keep going around it and around it and around it and around it. And ultimately, a lot of times people just give up. You know, if somebody is self-victimizing and every time they come to you and they cry, woe is me, and you don't feed back into that, you're letting them do that, and then you're not feeding back into it. You know, yes, and eventually they'll quit bringing these problems to you, quit tabling these problems to you. You know,
and that's super interesting, the whole thing. And it starts with awareness of the situation and
yourself and of
yourself and you know, others' patterns and your reaction to that, and reacting in that way and having them, whether they get the hint or they're just not getting the energy they want, and so it fades away. That's I mean, that's pretty ideal. You know, not too much conflict there. But sometimes you don't always have that, you know, sometimes that's not how it goes. Sometimes they might press harder and harder and harder. And I think, you know, those are the times that, you know, we just have to leave the situation altogether. You know, which is always an option.
It's kind of, you know, yes, I understand you're not going to change, and I'm not going to keep subjecting myself to it. And you know, or you have a hard conversation, there's conflict arises, and you either work through it productively and agree, you know, either that person understands that they're taking too much energy from you, or they keep saying no, and you know, then you lose that relationship, you lose that friendship, whatever, you know.
And you know, we kind of skipped over it, but I think this time to reflect and consider these options come from points of silence. So I think the power of silence, the power of taking yourself out of that situation and really being able to sit with your thoughts, whether it's writing them out, running sometimes, you know, I run often and have my best thoughts come to me, sitting in meditation, but time of reflection, you know, I think is
honest self-reflection.
You know, get off the phone, you know, turn the TV off, you know, maybe don't accept calls for a little while. Sometimes even the people that are telling you what you want to hear, it could be detrimental to a degree, because
passively building a negative energy transference. Not intentionally. But it becomes a habit. But
to really, you know, sit on these thoughts and ideas and see, you know, just that voice in your head, you know, see what that says. Respond to that, see how it makes you feel. Make the changes you need to make without outside interference. You know, I think is super important, utmost important.
Sure. Strive to understand.
Strive to understand
that,
self.
That balance,
Yep.
that energy transfer. Sure.
What'd you say? You said reside in yourself. Take
Retire
time.
in yourself.
Retire into yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Marcus Aurelius, I feel like it's
Is that what? Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. It all links in one way or the other,
absolutely.
man. But
Absolutely.
yeah, I mean, that was solid talk today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Solid talk.
Man. Absolutely. I feel like good energy balance in that conversation.
think so.
Man. I always absolutely appreciate the insight and I really enjoyed the conversation. Man.
Likewise. Hopefully you guys, did as well. Appreciate you guys tuning in as always.
Yeah.
We'll be back next Tuesday. We might have a guest. We'll wait. Yeah, we might have a guest. Bring someone else in so you don't hear us ramble on for however long. But
Awesome.
we're certainly gonna keep it moving, man.
Yeah,
Appreciate
absolutely.
y'all.
Thank you very much, guys. We'll see you next week.